So we're now being recorded. Tama. Okay. And then I can also share my screen. In particular, I want to share, what do I want to share? Patayin ko lang yung mga ibang hindi kailangan right now. Yeah, I can just share my desktop. All right, hopefully everyone can see my screen as I am now recording and sharing my desktop. All right, so right now, the plan is I would like to talk about some questions at the end of the chapter. So this is chapter 10, end of chapter questions. Okay, palalaking ko lang siya. If you can go there, that would be great. I think kasagutan na natin ng konti itong 1 tsaka itong 2. Let's skip 3 and let's jump to question 4. All right. So let's talk question 4 in chapter 10. Okay. So I'm just gonna pause every so often to make sure people get the question and the answers. Okay. So I will now also feel free to interrupt if my audio or my video becomes choppy or weird or if I get cut out. I should be fine though. Before I start, any questions? Kung wala, mag-thumbs up lang tayo. Okay, good. I see a lot of thumbs up. We can continue. So this is chapter 10, question 4. Ano ang tanong? Ito ang tanong. Consider an impact of an increase in thriftiness in the Keynesian cross. Okay. Suppose the consumption function is C, consumption, is equal to C bar plus C, small c, the marginal propensity to consume, times disposable income, Y minus T. Okay. So C bar is called the autonomous consumption. So ito yung value of consumption that is not related to disposable income. Okay, so any sort of disposable income. Any consumption that's not related to or driven by disposable income. So, ang daming pwedeng dahilan kung bakit may ganun. And let's just say that it's all summarized with the parameter C bar or the variable C bar. So, ayan. What happens to equilibrium income when the society becomes more thrifty, as represented by a decline in C bar? Okay. So, ano ang ibig sabihin ng thrifty? In case you didn't know, thrifty means you want to save some more or you simply don't want to consume as much. Okay. So, either way, that's called thriftiness. Okay. In this case, if you don't want to consume some more and you desire to save, you will spend less. So, yung C bar mo will fall. Okay. So, yun yung premise ng tanong, right? So, let's go to the whiteboard now. Here. So, ito yung consumption function mo, which is now a constant plus a function, something that's a function of y minus t. Okay. Again, I will also repeat the things that we talked about in class na ang mga functions na ginagamit natin ngayon are typically lines. So, this is C bar. And C bar will be the sort of intercept, right? That's the y-intercept. That means if your disposable income is 0, kung ziniro mo to, your consumption is not 0. It's C bar. Okay. And then this one is the part of the function that is associated with your x, right? Your independent variable, which happens to be a y minus t. Okay. So, yung premise ng tanong is what happens if the delta C bar or C bar becomes smaller, right? So, what would happen here? Bababa ang consumption, definitely. And because bababa ang consumption, bababa rin ang planned expenditure, right? And kung bababa ang planned expenditure, bababa rin ang, just wanted to pause here to ask the question, because this is super important. kung bababa ang planned expenditure, bababa ang... Anyone can just, open their mic and just answer or type something. Bababa ang consumption, bababa ang PE, therefore bababa ang... Oh, there's an answer in the chat. Let's check that out. Bababa ang Y because P equals Y, right? So we also know from the Keynesian cross that the value of these changes is essentially summarized by this equation here. So before we continue, make sure na alam nyo kung paano mag-drawing ng Keynesian cross, right? So let me just quickly do a quick and dirty drawing, right? Ito ang ating, ating y-axis. And then we have an x-axis here, correct? And then the value, or not the value, but the label for that one is y. And the label for the other one is... Other side for the y variable or the vertical intercept, it's what? As I struggle with controlling this, let me wait for your answer. So hard to... It's so hard to do this. And this is, oh, may sagot. This is PE. Yes, correct. Yeah, very easy, right? PE. Okay, so dahil ganyan yan, everyone should know also that there's a 45-degree line, okay, which is kind of like this. And then, meron ka ring another line that sort of looks like this, right? Which is your consumption line. Yeah, this is insane. Here we go. Dito pwede. Here and then C. Correct? So hopefully everyone knows this. And i-illustrate lang natin yung nangyayari. So if consumption falls because C bar falls, then basically you're going to have a second line down here. Right? And let's do this like with a green line. And if consumption shifts down, then Y will shift down. The change in Y is greater than the change in C bar or PE because of the multiplier. And the multiplier is 1 over 1 minus the MPC. Okay? So that is the first, I think that's the first question. The first question is, ano mangyayari sa equilibrium income? And the answer here is, bababa ang Y. And for a more complete answer, it will go down based on the multiplier formula, and it will go down by more than the change in C bar. Okay, so let me pause a couple seconds. And are there any questions? Nothing, right? Very, very easy so far. Next is savings. So this is something we have not yet done in class, but it should be also obvious, right? Because technically we've done it in the classical model. Pero eto, hindi pa natin subukan sa Keynesian short run model. So ano ulit ang formula for savings? So itong S, this is simply Y minus, ano? Anong savings? Y minus, merong sagot. Y minus C minus G. Great. Y minus C minus G. Correct? And that comes from all the way back in chapter 3. So the next line here is I've just substituted out the consumption. So it's going to be this one. It's going to be this. Okay. Kasi minus C bar, minus this, right? In fact, dapat may minus G pa to. So for completeness, let's do that. Right? Okay. Ay, sumagot. Okay. So this is minus C minus G, and if you if you continue the operation, you'll notice that may y ka dito and then may negative cy ka dito. So that becomes 1 minus cy. And then this should be plus ct. Okay, because there's a minus here and then you're distributing it to this minus. And then magkakaroon ka ng minus g. Okay? And then let me just change this and then minus g. This is your consumption function. Okay? Any questions? Let me pause briefly. Okay. Seeing as there are no questions. Sorry, I'm also eating. Pardon me. If this is your consumption function, what is the not consumption function, but savings function? What is now the relationship between savings on the one hand, and GDP or income on the other? Positive or negative? And this is the important insight na pala. So that's why let me pause here to make sure that everyone stares at this equation first and ask the question kung ano yung relationship ng y tsaka s. Okay. In order to answer that question, I guess you should know what the value of small c is, or the MPC. Is the small c less than 1? The answer is yes. And because it's less than 1, 1 minus c is greater than 1. Okay? Therefore, ano yung relationship ng y and s? The linear. Oops, there's someone here. There's a waiting room. I'm so confused about this waiting room. Sometimes kailangan or kung minsan ayaw or hindi necessary. Okay. So nothing? Come on, before I continue. Let me I mean, we're here until 1:15. We have a few minutes. Sige na. Subukan niyo lang. Ano? Mag-mic na kayo kung kaya niyo mag-mic. Simple lang naman di ba? Linear and ano ba? Usually yung pinag-uusapan lang naman natin is positively or directly related or negatively related, di ba? Yun lang naman siya. And particular, if it's a line, then if this is a line, then your savings is basically, ito yung mga constant mo or yung mga y-intercept mo. So it's negative c plus ct minus g. So ito yung mga y-intercept mo. Normally, these ones will be negative, right? Because matataas yung mga minus g tsaka yung minus c bar. But pwede din siya positive. So it really doesn't matter. What's the chat? Positive. Diba? Because this is 1 minus c, then plus yung nasa taas. Therefore, pag tumaas ang y, tataas ang savings, right? Okay, so this is one of the insights of the Keynesian cross model, that pag tumaas si y, tataas si c, and tataas rin si s. Ulitin natin, pag tumaas si y, or income, tataas si consumption, c, at tataas din si savings, s. Okay? So, armed with this equation, we can now show, what's our intuition here? As c bar falls, c falls, and y falls more than decrease in c, right? The savings, ano, what happens to savings? Savings will, okay, rise or fall? We wait. Savings will blank. Sagot sa chat. Savings will fall, right? Hopefully everyone knows that. Savings will fall kasi pag bumaba ang y, bababa ang s based on the savings equation. Savings will fall. Right? Okay, so that's your intuition, and that I think answers equilibrium saving goes down, and this is called the paradox of thrift, right? So, bakit siya paradox of thrift? Because there was a desire to become more thrifty by lowering consumption, but what happened was, if you did that, is bababa rin ang equilibrium income. reducing overall savings. So therefore, it's a paradox, right? That the desire to save will result in less overall or aggregate saving. And that's due to the fact that there's a multiplier. There's second, third, multiple round effects that as one person lowers their consumption, everyone else will also lower their consumption because their incomes are falling. Right? And therefore, as incomes are falling, savings are also falling across the board. Now, this doesn't happen in the classical case or classical model because, okay, so this is also an important point. I will pause here to make sure. We've been drilling this point for the past couple of weeks, but just to make sure, let's pause here. Why does this not happen in the classical model? Because in the classical model, y is blank. Because in the classical case, y is what? Not just exogenous, y is exogenous and fixed. Okay. Therefore, if C goes down, then that means S has to rise because Y is fixed, right? Because according to this, if C goes down, if Y is fixed, then S has to rise. Whereas in the Cajun model, if C goes down, Y will go down more, and then savings will go down. Okay, so that's 10, question 4, chapter 10, question 4. Lots of interesting questions at Keynesian Cross, and it revolves around this drawing here. Okay, and make sure you know how to draw this one. You know how to shift up, right? And make sure that you know what the general formula is for the multiplier. Okay, and it's always going to be the change in PE times 1 over 1 minus MPC. So we have a next question. Question 11, 1D. So that's in chapter 11. Just scooch on down. Check it out. So here's chapter 11, 1D. So this is part of the homework question that we did not answer. So government increases government purchases and taxes by equal amounts. Okay. And when we're asked to think about this in terms of the ISLM, but this is in fact also a sort of a stealth Keynesian cross question, right? Because the IS curve is basically the Keynesian cross, yeah. And then the LM curve is basically the demand and supply for real money balances or the demand for liquidity, the market for liquidity, I should say. Game. So let's go to the actual picture, or not the PowerPoint, I should say. The premise here is G and T, they rise together such that T minus G is unchanged. Ulitin natin, what is T minus G? We had talked about what T minus G is. There are a couple of different concepts that you can use here. Public savings, yes. So that's so far, that's what we've been using. Another phrase that you might that might sound more familiar is what's called a budget surplus or budget deficit. So what this is saying is that G and T will change, leaving the budget surplus or the budget deficit unchanged. All right. So in order to answer the question on IS, what you need is to know what line this is affecting. So again, hanapan naman tayo ng letra, right? So according to our IS and LM model, which curve, IS or LM, has G and T in it? Right. So that's always the first question. Which curve has G and T in it? And the answer is IS curve. So we have the IS curve here. And one of the interesting things about this question is that G and T are moving together. Hold on.
Okay ka na? Hindi mo na kailangan.
Hindi na kailangan. The G and T are moving together. So that's the interesting part, right? So we consider each separately first. Okay, so first, if G moves, then your multiplier is essentially this one. Hopefully everyone recognizes what this is. Okay, because we were able to calculate this in class. Okay, and it's an important concept, right? The change in G. So again, babalikan lang natin yung general point. Yeah, this is basically delta PE, correct? 1 minus MPC. Now, hopefully everyone recognizes this, that all you need to do is find out what happens to PE. Right? And in this case, PE goes up by the change in G. And you multiply it by 1 over 1 minus MPC to get your change in Y. And this has the regular interpretation that, the change in Y goes up by more than the change in G because 1 over 1 minus MPC is greater than the multiplier. Okay? Now we have the same sort of derivation here up top, on the right side, I should say, when you have an increase in T. Now, the reason why this looks different is because the change in T operates through the consumption function. Kaya meron kang marginal propensity to consume. So specifically, if T goes up, your consumption will fall. So that's why you have a minus MPC here. In class, I think we also discussed the change in T that's negative, right? So negative times negative is positive. In this case, hindi siya negative, right? You're increasing T here. So that's why it's negative times a positive. So overall, Y will now fall. So kung mapapansin ninyo, the left side and the right-hand side have opposite signs. Okay? So increase in G, that's called the fiscal expansion, right? Fiscal policy, right? You're expanding fiscal policy. And then what's happened? This is an expansionary fiscal policy.
Okay, smoker. This is smoke area. Should be okay.
An increase in policy here. So which increases GDP, correct? Yeah. Now on the other side, you have a contractionary policy because you're increasing taxes and you're decreasing consumption, the aggregate. Okay. What other thing happens here? So now we have to compare the positive number to the negative, right? So all you need to do is to add these two things together. Okay, so let's add them together, right? So let's do it. So first, it's here. Type the equation here. That's for G, right? And then if you add the other one, it's gonna be this one. Okay. So we can further simplify this, right, guys? Hopefully people can see that. we can simplify this further, yeah. Ano yung mga pwede nating i-simplify dito? First, we know that the change in G and the change in T are the same. Correct? So therefore, you can just call this change in T change in G. Now, if you have a change in G here and a change in G here, we can factor that out. So if you decide to factor that out, it's going to look like the following. It's not going to work. Do that. And I'm gonna do that. And I'm gonna do slash delta G. Does that make sense to everyone? I'll pause here to make sure everyone's caught up. And what we've done is just to assert that the change in G is equal to the change in T. Correct? So no question so far. If you notice, this one is basically 1 minus MPC divided by 1 minus, oops, sorry. Let's make sure people this. Yeah. See, it's very clear. Look at that, right? Because the denominator is the same and the numerator is now 1 minus MPC. And then you multiply that by delta. Sorry. Delta. Any questions so far? So what is 1 minus MPC over 1 minus MPC? How can we further simplify this? What is 1 minus MPC over 1 minus MPC? May sagot sa chat. 1 question mark. 1 po. Yes, it's 1, right? 1, the same thing in the numerator with the denominator, so it's 1. Therefore, it becomes what? Delta G. Greater than 0. Correct? So, in fact, this is actually, hindi natin nasulat to, but on this side, this is delta y from the change in G from delta G. Sorry, let me just nauusi ako. So delta G. Right. Won't work. Usually that works in LaTeX. Never mind. Ayun. This is the change from the change in G. And then you are now adding the delta y from the change in T. Wherein the first one is positive and the second one is negative. So a priori, hindi mo alam if that's going to net as positive or net as negative. Yeah. Because one is positive, one is negative. But pwedeng net niyan is 0. Pwedeng walang nangyari. So what happened here? If G and T both go up at the same time, then the change in Y is still positive. And the change in Y will be equal what? It will be equal to the change in G. Na wala ang multiplier. Basically, hindi na siya multiplier. Does that make sense? So in this one, it's as if the multiplier went away because the amount of increase in Y that exceeds the change in G is nabura. Nabura siya because of the change in T. But yet, the change in Y is positive, correct? Because we're not saying the change in Y is 0. It could have been 0, but it's not. The change in Y, though, is greater than G, the change delta G. Okay. So what's the change in Y? The answer is delta G. And therefore, do we think that the IS curve will shift? It is for any given R, tumaas ba or bumaba ang Y? Yun yung tanong, right? For any R, tumaas ba or bumaba ang R? So what's the answer? Tumaas or bumaba? Did it rise or did it fall? Let me pause here. There's an answer in chat. Y will go up, correct? And therefore, if Y went up for every R, notice we haven't talked about R yet, right? So that's why this is true for all R. Y goes up for all R. So there's a shift blank of the IS curve, and it's a shift. What kind of shift? Right or left? There's an answer. There's a right shift, right? There's a right. Shift right of the IS group. So this really tells you how to generalize the concept, right? All you need to do to understand what happens to the IS curve is to go through the Keynesian cross and to answer the question, did Y go up or did Y go down after the change, whatever the change is? And if Y goes up, then the IS curve will shift to the right because the rightward direction is where Y goes up. And if Y goes down, IS curve shifts to the left. So now, ipagpapatuloy na natin to. So hindi ko na sinulat yung the rest, right? But if there's a shift right of the IS curve, what happens to R? And what happens to, well, Y will go up, right? For sure. But what happens to R? Let me pause here and wait for the answer. May sagot? R goes up because you have to make sure that you are on the RLM curve. Tama si sir. Okay. And since the LM curve is upward sloping in R and Y, R has to go up. That's R up, Y up. What happens to consumption? Yeah. So this is very interesting. To know what happens to consumption, you need to know what happens to Y minus T, correct? But here's the problem. Y goes up, Y up, Y up. Y goes up and T is also up, correct? Therefore, a priori, you don't know if this becomes a negative number or a positive number. But we do know that the change in T and the change in G are the same. And as you can see here, the change in G is equal to the change in Y. Therefore, this is equivalent to the change in Y being the same as the change in T. Deltas are the same. Okay. So James, think about what's happening here first. Y goes up, T goes up. So di mo alam. But you know that T goes up the same amount as G, and G went up the same amount as Y. Right? So parang siyang, tawag doon, um, transitivity, right? The change in Y equals the change in G, which is equal to the change in D. Therefore, the change in Y is equal to the change in G. Right? Therefore, ano yung sagot? Y minus T becomes what? Let me wait for the answer. What happens to Y and T? Y minus T, I should say. Sagot sa chat. Constant. Diba, Jada? Because Y goes up by 1, T goes up by the same. Therefore, Y minus T is unchanged. Tama ba, guys? And therefore, if nothing happens to disposable income, what happens to consumption? I'll wait again. Consumption is unchanged, sabi ni Rafael. So, yes. Diba? So, crucial yan. So, again, tandaan nyo lang, every time you're asked a question, what happens to blah, blah, all you need to do to know is what happens to the endogenous variables R and Y, and if necessary or relevant, what is the relative change in the exogenous variables, in this case, T or G. Right? So, ano nangyari sa I? It should be easy. I goes, you wait again. What happens to investment? Right, because R goes up, then I must fall. due to higher R, real interest rates. Okay, very easy. Any questions? Okay, so I like this one a lot because dalawa yung nagbago, right? Dalawa yung nagbago. And this is an easy way to make sure that you really do understand because normally sa Keynesian cross, isa lang yung magbabago at any given time. But there's no rule to say that multiple things can change. Okay? There's no rule about that. So in fact, one way to make sure that you really understand the model is to like, what happens if three things change, right? Or two things change, right? So ano yung total effect niya on Y? Right? So pwedeng kasama yun. So let me pause here to make sure that everyone has no questions. Or if there are any questions, this is a Keynesian cross / ISLM question. So very relevant. Okay, let me bite my sandwich. Okay. Our next question is the following. Chapter 11 2A. Basahin natin sa chapter 11 2A. Use the ISLM model to predict the effects of each of the following shocks on income. Each of the following shocks on income. The interest rate, consumption. Oh, sorry. Let me reread this para mas understandable. Use the ISLM model to predict the effects of each of the following shocks on Y or income, interest rate R, consumption C, and investment I. In each case, explain what the Fed should do to keep income at its initial level. So mahalaga yan. That's one of the main differences between question 2 and question 1, which is you're thinking about the Fed trying to stabilize income in the model, right? So therefore, it will change. How will the Fed do that? It will affect what variable? What will it change? I'll wait as well. There's an answer in chat. Money supply, right? So you change the money supply and affect the position of the LM curve to make sure that Y is held constant. Okay, so let's do it. After the invention of new high-speed computer chips, many firms decide to upgrade their computer systems. So this is not in the LM because this has nothing to do with money or the money supply. This has something to do with expenditure, right? So what expenditure are we deciding to change here? What's shifting? There's an answer in chat. Investments, right? Because this is about changing the capital stock. And if it changes investments how? Do you invest more or do you invest less? So according to this, you decide to upgrade your computer system. That means you increase your spending on computer systems and therefore you are increasing your investment. Now, if I goes up, what happens to planned expenditure? Let me pause here to ask that question again. What happens to planned expenditure when investment goes up? Oh, there's an answer in chat. PE will go up, increase also, because PE is essentially C and ING. If I goes up, PE will go up. Correct. Okay. So with that, we can now go here. I increases, PE will rise. Okay. And if PE will rise, what happens to Y? Y will. Let me pause here to make sure. Again, everyone should know this already by now, right? Everyone should. If at this point, hindi nyo pa alam yung mga sagot, nag-iisip pa kayo, then that means you haven't practiced. Yes. See, everyone knows the answer, right? Y will rise because of the Keynesian cross. Y equals P. And shift IS to the, oh yeah, everyone also knows this because we just answered an ISLM question earlier. If Y goes up for all R, therefore IS will shift to the right. Very easy. Correct? So having said that, This is the initial bar. So remember, you should always label this, but for the purposes of this sort of trying to answer this question, we're gonna leave it be. Then gagawa na lang tayo ng bagong line, shifting to the right. Let's change the color. This one. Change it to red. Okay. And therefore, if nothing happens, then y will go up and then r will also. Okay. Now here's the LM curve. If you wanted to keep y at this level, at a lower level, how should LM move? To the shift to the right or shift to the left? Will it shift up or shift down? I'll wait. Oh, there's an answer. It will go to the left or shift up. So we will copy this. And then it will shift up all the way until it becomes this one. Babaguhin lang natin yung kulay. We're gonna turn this in. Oh, maybe. Right? It's a shift left or shift up. So how did the money supply change? Money supply should. So again, at this point, you can work through the demand and supply for money, which I would humbly suggest you should do. And if you were to do that, then you'll realize that what you need to do is raise interest rates even more. And therefore, you should shift the supply of money to the left. Because when you shift the supply of money to the left or decrease the supply of money, that tends to raise the real interest rate. Yes, M should decrease. Okay. So hindi ko na drawing dito yung supply and demand for real money balances. But because downward sloping on demand for real money balances, in order to increase R, right? You're moving from this point to this point. Kailangan tumaas ang R. Therefore, you have to decrease M or M over P. So what happened here? Ano ba yung sagot natin? Explain it. Okay. So before we continue, let's find out first, course, without changing anything, R up and Y up. And what happens to investment? Goes. Okay, I'm gonna wait. Everyone should know this already, right? If R goes up, then investment goes blank. Investment should go down, yes, because of the investment function. Then consumption goes because Y goes up, nothing happens to T, therefore disposable income goes up, then Y goes up, and then C goes up. Very easy. Any questions so far? Okay, so this is sort of an extension ng ISLM that we've been doing. The extension here is, okay, now by changing, Chris, I change it. Now, this is the change, right? This is the difference in this question. Magkakaroon ka ng reaction from the monetary policy, right? Monetary policy authority. And in this case, it will decrease the money supply. By changing, our up goes up more. It falls more. And C goes back to its old value. Why? Because Y goes back to its old value. So this is sort of the complete answer to this, right? So you know what C and I are doing depending on whether the monetary authority changes something or it doesn't change something. Okay. Why don't we try B? In B, a wave of credit card fraud increases the frequency with which people makes transactions in cash. Okay. So let's insert this. We increase the transactions in cash. So what is the shifting? Shifting what? The black. So dahil cash siya, we know that it's about money, right? That at least should be super clear. So wala nang iba, right? Hindi siya IS, nasa LM siya. Yes, so demand for money, right? Shifting the demand for money to the right. Correct. Any questions about this so far? Hmm. Now, if you were to increase the demand for money, and here I'm not going to draw the demand for money anymore. Please draw it on your own. But if you were to do so, how would the demand for money change? It would shift to the right. How will it change the equilibrium in the demand and supply for money or real money balances? Let me pause here to make sure people have a chance to answer the question. How will it change the market for real money balances? Answer in chat. Changes the demand for money, therefore raising R increases, right? But if R goes up, remember we haven't talked about Y at all, right? So if R goes up for all Y, then what should shift? What curve should well, we all know what should shift, right? The LM curve should shift, right? LM curve will shift. Kasi money nga siya. But that's not really the issue. But how will it shift? To the left or right or to up and down? Okay, the left, pressing no. Because it raises R for any given. So we can now do this, changing this color to red. Here. And in this case, it lowers Y and increases R. Any questions? Right. So basically the story here is as R is going up, investment is falling, and therefore you're moving down along, up along, I should say, up along. Yeah, yes. Then we can answer questions like R goes up, Y goes down. Investment goes down. We just mentioned that. And consumption goes down. Right? So this is super interesting actually. Your demand for money rises, but overall consumption actually falls. So that's a sort of a counter intuitive result. Okay. And that is true because sa money as a goods market, right? It's a goods market, bumaba ang I and therefore it reduces Y, which will reduce C. Yeah. So intuitively, that's what's happening. But it's counterintuitive because you might think that demand for money rises, correct? Then the reason why nothing else happens is because the curve, the money supply at first will not change. Now, how will how should LM shift to counteract this? Okay, let me now ask the question. How should the LM curve shift to counteract it? But remember, that's the whole premise of this question, right? Meron kang change, and then the monetary authority will do something with the money supply to counteract it. By counteract it, we mean to return Y to old, but to bumaba siya. Right? So this tantamount to saying, how will you then increase Y? LM should shift to the right and increase money supply. Okay. So again, you can think about this in terms of the demand and supply for money. Tumaas ang demand for money to make sure that the interest rates stay the same. Kailangan tumaas rin ang supply, right? Demand should equal supply at the old R only if supply actually goes up to meet it. Hopefully everyone got that, and this will now become like the yellow curve. Right? In order for it to go back, you need to shift the red line to the right and become the yellow line. Okay. So to count, ito yung sagot in text, right? To counteract increase in demand for money, supply for real money balances should rise to return R to its old level. And therefore, and also Y to level. Right? Okay. Because of this, given the change I unchanged, then Y is now unchanged by definition, right? And if Y is unchanged, then C is unchanged. So this is also very interesting because it's also linked to the whole should we target R or not, right? And if it's the LM curve that is undergoing a lot of frequent shocks, so the LM curve is moving up, down, left, right, then all the monetary authority needs to do is to target R, right? Because we want R to be at its old level here. So all you need to do is to change the money supply to return R to its old level, which will guarantee that Y will also return to its old level, assuming IS doesn't change. Correct? So hopefully people have sort of linked 2A or 2B, I should say, 2B with the whole why is the Fed or the BSP targeting the real interest rate? And the answer is because LM shocks are more prevalent. And this is sort of an example of that. So let me pause here to make sure everyone is on board. If there are any questions, we're almost done, actually. So I expected this to be an hour, at most an hour. And that's it. As you can see, this is a very focused, long test. This is just all about the theory of the the short run fluctuations, right? And stabilization. So we will finish with the next chapter, which is the open economy ISL, which should take a couple of meetings. Okay. Now, before that, we'll make sure that we answer the last kind of question, which is a numeric question, right? That's an analytical question based on actual functional forms for consumption and the investment. Okay, so this is chapter 11, 3A, which I think we sort of answered already in part before. So we'll just continue answering it now. So let's go to 11.3a. Consider this consumption function here, which is sort of standard right now. Investment function being this. Government and taxes is 100. So the actual question is about graphing, right? So before you can graph, kailangan mo muna isulat yung equation. So we'll make sure that people know how to do that. So here's your IS. Y is equal to C, I, and then G to 100. So notice that the only variables left are the endogenous ones, Y, and then R. So you can simplify this by doing 200 plus 100, 300 plus 200, 500 minus 75, 425. Then minus 25R is still here. You'll notice that this is 3/4. If you move this to the other side, so it will become 1/4 Y. So therefore, if you isolate Y, it will become 4 times 425 minus 25R. Hopefully people know how to do this. And I think I do because I've seen your homework in actual math class and you guys know how to manipulate it. Or you should. Super, super easy, super simple. Yeah. Right. Now you can distribute 4. This is just, what is 4 times 400? That's 1600. 4 times 24 is, 25 is 100. So 16 plus 1 is 70. Right. And then 25 times 4, that's literally 100. But 1700 minus 100R equals what? To help you plot it in R and Y space, dapat yung R yung mag-isa because that's the independent variable here. Y is independent variable. So once you move the R to the other side, the Y to the other side, then it becomes 17. Bakit 17? Because 1700 divided by 100 is 17 minus Y over. So now I ask the question. Okay, I will not plot, but if R is 0 to 8, then Y moves from something to something, right? So if R is 0, the value of Y is what? Ito siya, you can see it from here. If R is 0, so Y is just 1700. Now, as R goes up to 8, what will happen to Y? So 1700 minus 100 times 8. That's going to be 800. So 1700 minus 800. Ano yung 1700 minus 800? Tama ka, James? 1700? But what's the 1700 minus 800? 900. In fact, this is the plot already, right? Now you can imagine ano kang something that looks like this, right? And then it's gonna look like the following. This is 1700 here. And then this is, what's this? If Y is 0, what's R? Y is 0, what's R? 17. Okay. 1707. But then you're interested in plotting only to 8. Okay. So you're not interested in all the way here, all the way out here to 17. But say you're interested in between this value and this value here. So 800, is it 900? 907. Ah, no, not. This is 900 down here to 7. And 0 to 8 on real interest rate. Okay. Now the LM curve is this one. The real money supply is 1000 over 2 or 500. And you equate that to the demand for money, which is Y minus 100R. I know everyone can manipulate it. And you can get R equals -5 plus Y over 100. -5 siya because your 500 moves to this side. And then you're dividing it by 1. Notice also that R and Y are positively related here, and R and Y are negatively related. You can use to check kung tama ba yung mga equation. Now, let's try that again. From R is 0 to 8. Yung sa LM curve naman, what is Y? Moves from something to something. Okay. So this is the one equation here. We can use this, or you can use this. Your choice. So if R is 0, Y is, so burahin mo lang to, Y equals what? 500. Right? And because positive yung relationship niya as R moves up, okay, as R moves up, then Y should also go up. So in this case, if R is 8, so this becomes 800. So Y will become 500 plus 800. What's that? 500 plus 800. That's 1300. 1300. So again, you can plot that. So you can remove this. And then you can remove this. So this is from 0 to 8, right? So we're going to say I had mentioned earlier that I wasn't going to plot it. Sige na. Plot na natin. 0 to 8. To si 8. Correct? If it's 0, ano raw siya? If R is 0, then 500. R is 0, then 500. Okay, so let's say that this is 500 because this is 800, right? Sorry. 900. Yeah. So this is 900. So gawin natin mas malapit. So if this is 900, actually 500 pala to. So mga kalahati na siya. So this is supposed to be 900 and then 500 to, right? And then and then when R is this one, when R is 8, what's the value of the LM curves Y? It's 1300. So therefore, it's going to be here because 1300 is above 900 but less than 1700. So when you draw your curves, it should look a little bit like this. And hanggang dito lang pala siya. Because you're only plotting from 0 to 8. Okay, so it should look a little bit like this. Next is an equilibrium natin. Well, because you have this equation and then this equation, then you can simply equate it, right? Because the real interest rate here is the same as the real interest rate here. So this is the real interest rate from the IS curve, and this is the real interest rate from the LM curve. You're equating it. Okay. So let's go. Let's solve it. Very easy. Right. Yung 17 will now be plus 5, right? And then this minus y over 100 will move here. So this becomes y over 100 plus y over 100. Okay. So literally we're moving things around. We're just keeping y here in this value. So what is 17 plus 5? Let me pause here to make sure that everyone knows what 17 plus 5 is. What's 17 plus 5? Sagot ba tayo? 17 plus 5. It's mahiwagang 22, right? 22 plus, oops, plus, there are now two of these. Notice pareho lang sila, right? Y over 100, Y over 100. You have two of them. So it's 2y over 100. So what's 2y over 100? That is just y over 50. Okay? Oops, sorry. Hindi pala equals. Equal plus equals. Right? Because this is on the left-hand side of the equal sign. That's on the right-hand side of the equal sign. So it's 22 equals y over 50. So now, napakadali na lang ito. This one will become y equals 20 times 22 times 50. So this should be easy because 20 times 50, ano yun? 500 times 2, it's 1,000. 2 times 50 is 100. So 1,000 plus 100 equals, ano? 1,1. Tama. Napakasimple lang. Pwede na tayong mag-shopping sa SM. Or mag-add. Or mag-multiply. 100 ang y. So does that make sense here in the picture? This should be 500. This is 900. This is 13. And then this is 17. Ang sagot natin is 1,1. Ang 1,1 ay nasa gitna ng 13 at ng 9. Okay? So that's also how you should check if you're doing your math. If this is 9 and this is 13, dapat your equilibrium, y, should be between 900 and 1,300. Which is the case, right? It's 1,100. Okay? Tama ba yan, guys? Thumbs up kung nag-gets yung logic. It's a way for you to check if your math is on point. Kasi pag nakita niyo yung sagot is mga 1,5, 1,6, mali na kayo, right? That's how you can use the graph to check. Next, ano ang R mo? Can the R be greater than 8? That's my question. Without solving for it, can the R be greater than 8? No, of course not. Diba? Kasi yung intersection happens to be below 8. That's 8. That's 8. Right? So now let's figure out what the R is. Ang R natin. You can use ito or ito. Okay? Pwede mong gamitin kahit anong gusto mo. And i-insert tayo ng text box dito. Anong gusto nyo? R equals, sige, yung baba. Kasi ginawa ko kanina yung ano eh. Ginawa ko yung IS kanina. So, naman. Plus 1,100 divided by 100. So, it's gonna be minus 5 plus, what is 1,100 minus, divided by 100? You just move the decimal point 2 steps to the left. Let me pause here. Make sure everyone knows what this is. $1,100 divided by 100. What's that? Parang ka lang nagdi-divide into 100 peso bills. Ilang 100 peso bills ang 1,100? Oh, 11. Tama, 11. Oh, very easy. Very easy. So, negative 5 plus 11. Tama, guys? So, ano ang negative 5 plus 11? That's the same as 11 minus 5. So, madali lang to. Pag bumibili ka ng taho, ano ang 11 minus 5? Well, usually yan yung mga tanong. 11 and then 6 ang equilibrium. So 11 minus 5 is 6. Okay. Of course, I'm talking about the price of taho way back in the 80s. So I have no idea. Mga matrenta na yung taho. Okay, so 11 minus 5 is 6. So again, you look at the picture. Pwede bang 6 yan? Pwede, kasi it's less than 8 and it's higher than 0. Right? Anything that's less than 8 and higher than 0, it's a possible equilibrium. And this happens to be 6, closer to 8. So it makes sense. Hindi tayo nagkamali. Okay. So I have planned on finishing or stopping here. hopefully this also will help with your health break. Na sinasabi. And everyone should like chill and relax. And hopefully, we'll see you all next week. Next week, ano mangyayari? There's just gonna be 2 lectures to finish chapter 11. That should be more than enough to finish chapter 11, the Open Economy Mundell Fleming model, Open Economy ISLM. Then after that, that's gonna be the second long test naman. Okay. Other announcements. I finished the assignment into groups for macro news. And in macro news, there should also be a description in your groups as to what topic number you are. Okay. So you should be aware kung ano yung topic number ninyo, and the topic number is associated with the list that's on Conflent. So for those people who are doing Okun's Law, Phillips Curve, and one other thing, I forget, baka convergence growth. I think yung tatlong yon, right? If there are people who are doing that, please see me. So if you want to start getting some data, I can help you with that. But I also wanted to point out na yung importante sa macro news is to update the theory that we've learned so far because the book is old. And one of the reasons why we're doing this is to collect data to sort of update the pictures that are in ManQ. And one of the degrees of freedom na ibinibigay sa inyo is you can get, cross-country, you can get it for Philippines, you can get it for different time periods interest you and so on. Okay. But as your guide, you should look at the book, and that's the theory that you're asked to evaluate using these graphs and data, right? So may nagtanong, for instance, see nominal exchange rate, right? Nominal exchange rate and real exchange rate. So this is about how inflation differentials tend to change the nominal exchange rate. So that's the picture that's associated with it. Well, so may picture usually simple, and you're asked to update it using new international data or Philippine data, as opposed to US data, right? May tanong sa chat. If ever classes suspend on Tuesday, will the exams push through on 18? So, why might it be suspended? I'm just curious. May mangyayari? Okay. Wala namang typhoon ngayon, and it's already Thursday. But we'll play it by ear. Let's see. So I'm thinking probably may klase naman on Tuesday, pero let's see. There's also an option to do an online class again because we really don't have time because yung finals week is after the second week of December na. So technically, I only have like 3 weeks for the finals material, right? In fact, there's a konti lang siguro yung finals material. I'm thinking of making it comprehensive kasi baka kulang yung material for the finals, but that's an open question. We'll find out that. Okay. So any other questions? I will update that right now when it's done, like processing this video. Any other questions for now?
Sir, question po.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sir, nag-ask po kasi sa both AM and PM class, pwede po ba kami mag-request if pwede pong maiusad yung exam for 25 para po, okay lang naman po if like mag-discuss po for LE3 before mag-exam just to give us more time po siguro. If it's
Or time
okay.
to what?
To study po for the exam, and actually we're packed po with other exams din po, so para we can study better po for the exam.
Kasi next week maraming exam? Or, I'm sorry, 2 weeks from now, maraming exam?
Yes po, yung pagitan, actually may exam po kasi kami ng 20 din, so and alam ko po 15, and I don't know po sa ibang class, but I think they have also exams din po dun sa mga dates pagitan nun. So, if ano po, we're requesting po if ever, pwede po sana sa 25.
Okay, let me check my dates. Technically, I have no problem with any of this as long as okay lang sa inyo. The problem is hindi na natin pwedeng balikan to, guys. Yun yung issue, right? I mean, kung i-push forward niyo yung date ng exam, we're not gonna do a review na parang, oh, balikan ulit natin yung yung test 2. Okay? Gets nyo ba yun? Gets nyo ba yung logic? Okay? Hindi natin pwedeng balikan. Alright? So let's check out the dates here. Okay lang ba sa inyo yun? May comment? Mas okay kasi kung after next week para mas fresh. I've seen also your homeworks. Unless you have completely cheated or did not answer it, nangopia lang kayo, pwede yun. Everyone knows how to solve everything. And this is a pretty compact long exam. So, kayo ang in charge. Okay? So, anong date ito? 20... Where are we right now? We're in 6. So, ayaw nyo rin ang 20 kasi may exam, right? So, 25. Okay? So, I will wait. So, basically, itanong nyo sa mga classmates ninyo. I'm sure meron kayong text chain, right? Right, guys? Hello?
Yes po, sir.
Yes. Yes. So, kung merong umayaw sa 25, then itutuloy natin sa November. Kung merong umayaw sa 25, itutuloy natin sa 18. Okay? So, secretly, anyone can just email me and say, ayoko ng 25. Okay? So, sometime next week, we will change the date if wala namang nag-object. Okay? But anyone can object, right? So, anyone can hear me now because I will upload this and hopefully everyone will watch this video. So, if you are objecting to 25, then matutuloy siya on the 18. And to be honest, Jada and everyone, I think it's better to keep it closer para hindi mo na siya kailangan tandaan. Essentially, kasi there's a big break, Jada, between long test 2 material and finals material. Because the finals material, well, we're essentially going back to the classical one. Kind of. We're doing Phillips curve also, so that's not necessarily true. Pero si ISLM mismo, we're not gonna do it anymore for the finals. We're just gonna do ASAD stuff. Okay, so that's something you should know, right? So mas maganda sana kung matapos na siya early and then you can basically, it's the wrong phrase, but you can basically forget ISLM. Until next next sem na. Right. Of course, you shouldn't forget ISLM because this is the workhorse model. So next sem, ito ulit ang gagamitin nyo, and in a dev econ situation or international macro situation, babalikan nyo rin ulit ito. Alright, so yun yung instructions. Anyone can just veto the proposal na November 25. And once vetoed, babalik tayo sa November 18. And to be clear, this is also what I'm advising para lang matapos na siya and then para lang you can focus on ISLM now and then later on you'll just do ADAS, Phillips curve, and growth theory. All right, having said that, any other questions? Okay. If there are no further questions, I'll hope to see you next Tuesday. Ingat kayo. Bye.
Thank you, sir.